The letter sat on the kitchen counter, unopened, its white edges sharp against the wooden surface. My wife, Anna, had left it there, her hands trembling when she brought it in from the mailbox. I still remember the way she looked at mine. Tired lips pressed together as if she already knew it was bad news. "It's from the HOA," she whispered, and my heart sank because every letter from them meant another fight. Another threat, another weight on our shoulders. For months. Now, they had been circling us like vultures, always finding something wrong. The mailbox was not regulation height. The roses Anna planted in front of our porch were not in the approved color scheme. Even the small flag my son had stuck into the flower bed on Independence Day drew a warning. But this time, it wasn't about flowers, or flags, or paint. It was about my wife, about her refusing to bow down. Anna had ignored their last fine. She said it proudly, her chin raised like a soldier who refused to surrender. "I'm done paying them for living on our own land," she told me, her voice shaking with equal parts anger and exhaustion. She had written a letter back to the HOA board, telling them their constant harassment was harassment, plain and simple. She never mailed the payment, and she didn't care what they thought of it. And in that moment, I couldn't help but feel both proud and scared for her. The envelope on the counter was thicker this time. Anna finally ripped it open, her fingers tearing at the paper as though it had personally insulted her. Inside was not just a fine notice, but a bold warning. Failure to comply will result in further action, including law enforcement involvement. My wife laughed bitterly. Law enforcement? For not paying them their ridiculous little fee. Let them try. Her voice cracked at the end, though she was tired of fighting, tired of standing tall every day in front of people who treated us like criminals in our own neighborhood. 2 nights later, it happened. We were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sky turn pink as the sun slipped away. My wife leaned against me, her hair smelling faintly of lavender, and for a brief moment, it felt like peace. Then, headlights flared at the end of our driveway, sharp and cold. A police cruiser. My stomach tightened. Anna stiffened beside me. "They didn't," she whispered. But the fear in her voice told me she already knew they had. The officer stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. Karen, our HOA president, was right behind him, her arms folded smugly across her chest, as if she had just pulled off the most brilliant scheme of her life. She didn't even glance at us first. She looked straight at the officer, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "That's them. They've refused to pay their fines. I told you they'd ignore the law. You know what you have to do." The officer cleared his throat and turned toward us. My wife's hands tightened around mine, and I felt her nails digging into my skin. She was scared, but she didn't want to show it. She stood up slowly, her chin high, facing him like she'd been preparing for this moment. "So this is it," she said, her voice steady. "You're here to arrest me for planting roses and not paying Karen her extortion money?" Karen smirked, tilting her head. "Rules are rules, Anna. You think you're above them?" "Not anymore." The officer didn't say anything right away. He just stared at my wife, his brows furrowed, his face pale under the porch light. I noticed his hand tremble slightly on his belt, like he wasn't sure what to do. My heart pounded. Was he actually going to do it? Was he really going to drag my wife away in handcuffs, in front of our children, over a fine that wasn't even lawful? Then his lips parted. His voice was soft, shaky, almost disbelieving. "Judge, it's you." Anna froze, confusion flashing across her face. Karen's smug smile faltered. The silence that followed was thick, like the entire world had stopped, spinning just to listen. The officer took a step back, his face a mix of shock and recognition. "Your Honor," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes were wide, filled with something that looked like respect, or maybe fear. Karen's face twisted in confusion. Judge. She repeated, the word like acid on her tongue. She turned to Anna, her fake confidence crumbling. What is he talking about? Anna didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her hand gripping mine tightly. Then, slowly, she raised her head higher, her eyes hard as steel. That's right, she said, her voice calm, steady. You've spent months trying to humiliate me, to break me. And you never once stopped to think about who you were dealing with. The color drained from Karen's face as the officer quickly straightened his posture, as though suddenly remembering who he was standing in front of. He stammered something about a mistake, about not realizing, but Karen wasn't listening. Her eyes darted between us, panic creeping into her expression. For the first time since this nightmare began, the balance of power had shifted. And in that moment, standing on that porch with the police officer, staring at my wife like she was royalty and Karen shrinking back into the shadows, I realized something. This wasn't over. It was only the beginning, because if Karen wanted a war, then she was about to find out exactly what it meant to lose everything she thought she controlled. The officer's words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. My wife, Anna, stood still, her eyes locked on Karen, who for once looked utterly speechless. I could almost see the gears turning in Karen's head, trying to reconcile the smug picture she had painted of herself as queen of the HOA, with the sudden realization that the woman she had been tormenting wasn't just a neighbor to bully. She was a judge. The officer's demeanor shifted instantly. He took off his hat, holding it in his hands like a schoolboy caught talking back to his teacher. Your Honor, I wasn't told. I didn't know, he stammered. His face flushed with embarrassment. Anna didn't speak right away. She just looked at him with that calm, steady gaze that she wore in courtrooms, the same gaze that made hardened criminals tremble and lawyers second-guess their words. My heart swelled with pride watching her, this woman who had carried so much weight on her shoulders, who had faced down months of harassment. Now finally standing in her true power, Karen tried to salvage the situation. She stepped closer, her voice sharp. This is ridiculous. She's just another homeowner. Her job doesn't matter here. The rules are the rules. Anna's voice cut through like a blade. The law is the law. And what you've been doing isn't just harassment, Karen, it's abuse of authority. You've manipulated, intimidated, and threatened families under the guise of rules. And now you've called the police to enforce your personal vendetta. Do you even realize what that means legally? Karen's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. She wasn't used to people talking back, much less tearing her down in front of others. You can't talk to me like that. She sputtered. The officer shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, he said, his voice firmer now, directed at Karen. This is not how law enforcement works. I can't. I won't be part of this. I wanted to cheer, but anger burned inside me too. I thought about the nights Anna cried quietly, in bed after yet another nasty letter. About the time our son came home from school, asking why Mrs. Karen said our family wasn't fit for the neighborhood. About the fines we paid just to keep them off our backs. Money that could have gone to our kids, to our lives. All of it rushed back in that moment, and I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Karen's face reddened. But not from shame, no. She was too stubborn for that. It was rage. She jabbed a finger toward us, her voice screeching. This isn't over. You think your title makes you untouchable? You're still under the HOA, and you'll follow the rules like everyone else. If you don't, I'll make sure you'll make sure of nothing, Anna interrupted, her voice calm, cold. Because starting tomorrow, I'll be filing a motion to review your leadership of this HOA. Every decision you've made, every fine you've issued, every threat you've thrown at families, It's all going under the microscope. I hope you've enjoyed your power, Karen, because it ends now." The officer looked at my wife like she had just laid down the final judgment in a courtroom. He nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her authority. "I'll make sure this incident is reported correctly, Your Honor," he said softly before backing away toward his cruiser. He wanted no part in Karen's vendetta anymore. Karen's smugness collapsed entirely. She sputtered, tripping over her own words, but no sound of confidence came out. Her power was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. She turned sharply and stormed down the driveway, muttering curses under her breath. When the cruiser pulled away, the silence that followed was almost deafening. My wife finally exhaled, her shoulders sagging. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as tightly as I could. For the first time in months, I felt her relax in my embrace. Like she finally believed the nightmare might end. But I also knew Karen. She wasn't the type to give up easily. If anything, the humiliation she suffered tonight would only fuel her hatred. She would fight back, clawing, desperate to regain control. And that meant we had to be ready. That night, after the kids were in bed, Anna and I sat at the kitchen table with steaming cups of coffee between us. Her eyes were still fierce, though exhaustion weighed heavy on her face. "She won't stop," Anna said quietly. She doubled down. "She'll try to drag us through hell." "Then let her," I replied, my voice steady. "Because now we fight back. Not just for us, for everyone she's hurt." Anna's gaze softened. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Do you know how many families have come to me in whispers, afraid of what she might do if they spoke up? Do you know how many people she's silenced with threats of fines, foreclosures, even eviction? I've listened to them, but I couldn't act not without cause. Tonight, she gave me the cause." Her eyes glistened, not from fear, but from determination. "I'm going to tear down everything she's built on lies." And in that moment, I believed her. I didn't know exactly what the coming weeks would bring: court filings, angry neighbors, maybe even more police visits, but I knew one thing. Karen had finally picked a fight she couldn't win. And my wife, the woman Karen thought was just another target, was about to become her greatest nightmare. The following morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. News traveled faster than wildfire in our community, and Karen's humiliation spread from porch to porch before the sun had even fully risen. Neighbors who usually avoided eye contact with us now lingered longer at their mailboxes, their eyes curious, some even hopeful. A few gave small nods of encouragement, quiet gestures that said, "We heard. We're with you." Karen's SUV screeched into her driveway around 8 a.m. I watched from our window as she stormed out, phone in hand, yelling into it so loudly that her voice carried across the cul-de-sac. Her blonde bob bounced furiously as she paced, her free hand slicing the air. She was spinning her own version of the story, no doubt, painting herself as the victim of a dramatic overreach. My stomach twisted because I knew people like her, they never admitted defeat. They doubled down. Anna sat at the table, laptop open, fingers moving with precision. She wasn't wasting time. She pulled up case law, HOA regulations, and every statute that applied to neighborhood governance. She wasn't just preparing a motion, she was building a war chest. I watched her, the fire in her eyes, and I realized this wasn't only about Karen anymore. It was about every neighbor who had been silenced, fined, or humiliated into submission. By noon, a knock came at our door. It was Robert, the elderly man from 2 houses down. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder as though Karen might leap out of the bushes at any moment. His voice trembled when he spoke. "Judge, ma'am, I heard what happened last night. I just wanted to say thank you. Someone needed to stand up to her." Anna gestured for him to come in, but he shook his head quickly. I can't stay if she sees me here." He trailed off, swallowing hard. "She fined me $600 last year because my grandson left his bike in the driveway. $600. And when I tried to appeal, she threatened to start foreclosure proceedings. I couldn't risk it. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. $600 for a bike." The cruelty wasn't just in the fine, but in the way Karen thrived on fear. Robert's eyes welled up. "If you're going after her, please, don't stop. She's ruined too many lives here." Anna placed her hand on his arm gently. "I won't stop, Robert. I promise you." That promise became her anchor. Over the next week, neighbors trickled in, cautiously at first, then bolder as word spread that Karen's grip might finally be weakening. A young couple who had been fined for too many guests at a barbecue. A single mother who'd been shamed for leaving her trash cans out an hour too long. Even the quiet family at the end of the street, who no one really knew, they confessed that Karen had tried to force them to repaint their house because she didn't like the shade of beige they chose. Every story fueled Anna's fire. She wrote everything down, compiling a thick binder of evidence. By the end of the week, it looked less like a binder and more like a weapon. But Karen wasn't sitting quietly. She retaliated, just as we knew she would. On Friday, a letter was taped to our door. It wasn't in an envelope, just a piece of paper with the HOA's letterhead scrawled across the top in bold ink. It read, "Effective immediately, you are fined $2,000 for public defamation of the HOA board. Continued attacks will result in liens placed against your property." I felt my blood boil. $2,000 for speaking the truth, for daring to stand up. Anna didn't flinch. She crumpled the paper in her fist and tossed it straight into the trash. "She's panicking," she said simply. "This isn't authority, it's desperation." Still, the intimidation weighed heavy. That night, our 10-year-old daughter asked me why the lady with short hair hated us so much. I didn't know how to answer her. How do you explain to a child that some people thrive on cruelty, that they hurt others just because it gives them a sense of control? The breaking point came 3 days later. We woke up to find our driveway blocked by a tow truck, its engine growling as the driver prepared to hook onto Anna's car. Karen stood nearby with her arms crossed, a smug smile plastered on her face. "Non-compliance," she announced loudly, as though performing for an audience. "Failure to pay fines results in seizure of property." I stormed out the door, fury burning in my chest. "Move that truck. You have no right." Karen held up a clipboard like it was a shield. "I have every right. You've defied me one too many times. Maybe losing your car will teach you a lesson." The tow driver looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I don't know about this. Usually I need a court order for private property. She is the court," I shouted, pointing at Anna, who had stepped out onto the porch in her robe. Her voice carried across the yard, sharp and commanding. "Unhook the car now. If you continue, you'll be complicit in an illegal seizure." The driver's eyes widened when he realized who she was. He muttered an apology and quickly backed the truck down the street, leaving Karen sputtering with rage. Anna didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply walked down the driveway, calm as ever, and handed Karen a folder. "This," she said, "is a preliminary injunction against your actions as HOA president. As of today, you are under investigation for abuse of power, extortion, and harassment. Copies have already been sent to the county court." Karen's face drained of color. She reached for the folder with shaking hands, scanning the official documents inside. For the first time, her mask cracked. Fear flickered in her eyes. "This is a war you can't win, Karen," Anna said softly, "and I'm just getting started." The days that followed were like the calm before a storm, at least for us. Karen, on the other hand, was unraveling. We saw her stomping around the neighborhood, knocking on doors, trying to rally support from the very people she had tormented for years. But her words didn't carry the same weight anymore. Neighbors who once cowered in silence now shut their doors in her face. Some even filmed her outbursts from their porches. It's the same way you'd record a tornado from the safety of your basement window. Dangerous, but fascinating to watch collapse. Inside our home, Anna was relentless. The dining room table was covered in papers, statutes, precedent cases, witness statements from neighbors who finally had the courage to come forward. Our children tiptoed around her, whispering to each other like they were in a library, sensing that what she was building wasn't just a case, was a reckoning at night. Though when the house was quiet, the weight would show. I'd find her staring at the ceiling, exhaustion written on her face. "What if she finds a way to ruin us before this gets to court?" she whispered one night. I held her hand and told her the truth that Karen had already tried and failed, and each failure made her weaker. But deep down, I worried too. Because a cornered enemy is always the most dangerous. And sure enough, Karen struck back. One morning, we woke to the sound of hammering. I stepped outside and nearly lost my breath. A giant, garish violation notice sign had been staked into our front yard. Bold red letters screaming for the entire neighborhood to see. Property in breach of community. Rules subject to foreclosure. Anna's jaw tightened as she read it. Our kids stood frozen behind us, their small faces twisted in fear. Are we going to lose our house? Our daughter whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I knelt down, brushing her hair back. No, sweetheart. No one is taking our home. Not ever. Anna's voice cut through the air. Take it down. Karen was standing across the street, smirking with her arms folded. Can't do that, she said. It's HOA policy. Maybe now your neighbors will see you for what you really are, rule breakers who think you're better than everyone else. Something inside me snapped. I started forward, fists clenched, but Anna's hand shot out to stop me. She said firmly. She walked calmly to the sign, gripped it with both hands, and yanked it out of the ground. Then she carried it across the street and dropped it at Karen's feet. You just committed another act of public defamation, Anna said, her voice razor sharp. I hope you're keeping track, because the courts certainly will. Karen's smirk faltered, but she quickly plastered it back on. You can't scare me. You may be a judge, but in this neighborhood, I'm the law. Anna stepped closer, her eyes like steel. No, Karen, you're a tyrant, and tyrants always fall. Later that day, Anna filed an emergency motion for a restraining order against Karen, citing harassment and intimidation. Within 12 hours, a county judge, one of Anna's colleagues, signed it. Karen was officially forbidden from stepping foot on our property or making direct contact with us. When the papers were served, I watched her face contort with rage, her pride wounded, deeper than any fine could ever reach. But Karen wasn't finished. That same evening, we heard shouting outside. I peeked through the blinds and saw Karen on her driveway, screaming at a small group of neighbors she had managed to gather. Her voice carried across the cul-de-sac. She thinks she can destroy me. She thinks because she wears a black robe in court, she's untouchable. But this is my neighborhood. If she takes me down, she'll take all of you down too. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, no longer the obedient followers she once commanded. One finally spoke up, a middle-aged man who had been fined thousands for his shed being 2 feet too tall. No, Karen, she's not taking us down. She's standing up for us. And maybe it's about time you learned what that feels like. The group dispersed, leaving Karen shrieking alone in the dark, her voice hoarse, her empire crumbling. That night, our son asked Anna a question that nearly broke me. Mom, he said quietly, are you scared of her? Anna pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "No, sweetheart, not anymore. Because the truth is stronger than her lies, and the law is stronger than her hate." I watched as our children nestled against her, the fear in their eyes slowly being replaced with something else, hope. For months, Karen had stolen that from us, twisting our lives into knots of anxiety and dread. But now, with every move Anna made, with every piece of evidence stacked against Karen, we were taking it back. Still, as I lay in bed that night, couldn't shake the image of Karen's face, wild, desperate, cornered. And I knew this battle wasn't over. If anything, the real war was only beginning. Because people like Karen don't go down quietly. They go down swinging. The official hearing date came faster than expected. The county had moved quickly after Anna's emergency motion, and within 2 weeks, Karen was set to appear in court to answer for her actions as HOA president. The moment the letter arrived, sealed with the county stamp, Anna's eyes softened with relief. But behind that relief was a fire of determination that this wasn't just about our family anymore. It was about everyone Karen had hurt. The night before the hearing, our living room filled with neighbors. One by one, they came carrying folders, photos, and letters, evidence of years of abuse. The air was thick with both fear and hope, a strange mix that made the house feel alive in a way it hadn't in months. I was fined $1,200 for having my Christmas lights up 2 days after New Year's. A woman named Lisa said, her voice trembling with anger. She threatened to foreclose on me for leaving my garage door open while I was unloading groceries. A young father added. His wife nodded, tears in her eyes. An elderly woman who rarely left her home clutched Anna's hand and whispered. She told me I wasn't fit to live here because of my health. I couldn't even breathe without worrying she'd send me another letter. Anna wrote everything down, her pen flying across the page. Every story became another stone in the wall of truth she was building. And as neighbors spoke, something shifted. Fear turned into courage. Shame turned into solidarity. For the first time, the neighborhood wasn't fractured by Karen's intimidation, was united against her. But Karen wasn't blind to it. She lurked outside our window that night, her silhouette visible under the street lamp. She didn't come near, she couldn't. Not with a restraining order in place, but she stood there long enough to make her presence known. A shadow, a warning. Let her watch, Anna said when I pointed her out. Let her see that her reign is over. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse was buzzing. Karen arrived in her signature red suit, strutting like she owned the world. But her eyes betrayed her wild, darting, nervous. She hadn't expected resistance. She hadn't expected the people she ruled over with fear to finally rise up. When we walked in, dozens of neighbors followed. Karen's face fell. She hadn't anticipated the crowd, hadn't thought so many would dare stand against her. She tried to sneer, to hold on to her arrogance. But it looked more like desperation. The judge overseeing the case, a colleague Anna had worked with before, read through the thick stack of evidence with furrowed brows. Letter after letter, photo after photo, story after story painted a chilling picture of an HOA weaponized for personal power. Karen tried to argue, her voice sharp, shrill. They're exaggerating. They're lying. I was only enforcing the rules, but every time she spoke, another neighbor stood. Another voice cracked under the weight of truth. Another piece of her empire crumbled in plain view. Anna didn't gloat. She didn't shout. She didn't even raise her voice. She presented the evidence with calm precision, her words steady and unshakable. She wasn't just a wife defending her home. She was a judge defending justice. And that presence, that quiet authority, filled the courtroom in a way Karen's bluster never could. When the judge finally spoke, the room went silent. His voice was stern, unwavering. This court finds overwhelming evidence of misconduct, harassment, and abuse of authority on the part of Ms. Karen Thompson, acting as HOA president. Effective immediately, Ms. Thompson is removed from her position and barred from serving on any HOA board within the state. Furthermore, restitution must be paid to affected homeowners for unlawful fines and threats. The gavel struck, sharp and final. The room erupted. Some neighbors wept openly. Others embraced. Relief washed over the crowd like a wave, and for the first time, the tightness in my chest began to loosen. Karen sat frozen, her face pale, her hands clutching the edge of the table as though the wood itself could keep her from drowning. But then, as the courtroom cleared, she turned her eyes on us. And in that gaze, I saw something that chilled me. Not surrender, not regret, but hatred pure, burning, venomous hatred. "You think this is over?" she hissed as we passed. "You humiliated me. You destroyed everything I built. I'll make sure you pay for this." Anna didn't flinch. She leaned down just enough so Karen could hear her whisper, "No, Karen, you destroyed yourself. And the only thing you built was fear." We walked out together, hand in hand, our neighbors following behind us like a caravan of survivors leaving a battlefield. The sun was warm on our faces, brighter than it had felt in months. But as much as I wanted to believe the war was won, I knew Karen too well. She wasn't finished, and I was right. That night, long after the courthouse victory, I heard the sound of glass shattering. I rushed to the front porch and froze. A rock lay on the steps, wrapped in a scrap of paper. Scrawled in messy black ink were the words, "This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me." I looked up into the night, into the darkened street where shadows danced under the flickering lamppost. Karen was out there somewhere, watching, waiting. The battle in court was won, but the war for our peace was far from over. The rock with its jagged threat lay on our porch like a wound, a reminder that even though the law had stripped Karen of her crown, her hatred was still alive and dangerous. I picked it up, my hands shaking with anger, but also with fear, because threats scrawled in ink have a way of clawing into your mind long after you've crumpled the paper. Anna read the note, her expression unreadable. She didn't flinch, didn't curse, didn't even sigh. She just folded it neatly and slipped it into a plastic bag. "Evidence," she said quietly, her voice calm. But I knew her too well. Beneath that calm was a storm she wouldn't let anyone see, not even me. The kids were terrified. Our daughter clung to Anna's robe, asking if the mean lady was coming to take us away. Our son, only 12, tried to act brave, but I saw the way his small hands balled into fists, his lips trembling as he whispered, "I'll protect us." Those words cut me to the bone. He was a child, forced to carry a burden he never should have known. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me jolt awake, scanning the shadows, listening for footsteps that never came. Anna, though, stayed up at the table with her laptop, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the screen. When dawn broke, she finally shut it with a snap and looked at me with weary but determined eyes. "If she wants a war," she said, "then I'll end it for good." Karen's escalation was swift and ugly. Within days, anonymous flyers appeared taped to streetlights, warning neighbors that Anna was a corrupt judge abusing her power. They were poorly printed, full of lies and half-truths. But the intent was clear. Karen wanted to poison the well, to smear Anna's reputation and claw back control through fear and slander. We collected every flyer and added them to the growing evidence file. But the damage to our peace was undeniable. Everywhere we went, church, the grocery store, even our kids' school, I could feel eyes on us. Some whispered support, but others looked away, unsure who to believe. That was Karen's weapon now. Doubt then came the night that shattered whatever fragile calm we had left. I woke to the acrid smell of smoke. My heart stopped as I bolted upright. Anna was already at the window, pulling the curtains back. Outside, our trash bins were engulfed in flames, the fire licking dangerously close to the side of our house. "Get the kids," I shouted, grabbing the garden hose. The water sputtered weakly, but I fought with it, spraying down the flames as neighbors spilled out of their homes in their pajamas. Someone called the fire department, but by the time they arrived, the fire was nearly out. The bins were melted. Plastic husks, blackened and twisted. And there, spray-painted across our garage door in crude red letters, was one word: LIARS. Our daughter sobbed into Anna's shoulder while our son stood in stunned silence, his eyes wide and wet. Neighbors whispered, shaking their heads, some angry, some afraid. But I didn't look at them. I looked at Karen's darkened house across the street, its windows like dead eyes watching us burn. The fire chief pulled me aside. "This was deliberate," he said grimly. "Could have been a lot worse if it spread. You should file another report." We did. Anna submitted the evidence. With the county sheriff's office, the restraining order was expanded. The investigation deepened. But Karen was slippery. She never left fingerprints, never left enough proof to tie her directly. She was smart enough to cover her tracks, reckless enough to keep going. The next morning, Anna sat our children down at the breakfast table. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. "We're not going to let her scare us. This is our home. And no matter what she does, she cannot take that from us." Our son looked at her, his small voice breaking. "But what if she hurts you?" Silence broke Anna in a way I'd never seen. She pulled him close, her tears finally spilling. "She won't," she whispered, "because I promise you I'll stop her before she ever can." And then Anna did something I didn't expect. She called a meeting not in secret, not behind closed doors, but in the open. At the community clubhouse Karen once used as her throne room. When we walked in, dozens of neighbors filled the chairs. Some were scared, some were angry, but all were ready. Anna stood at the front, her voice strong, commanding. She laid out everything: the fines, the harassment, the threats, the fire, the graffiti. She showed them the evidence, not as a judge, but as a neighbor, a mother, a wife. She wanted us isolated. She wanted us afraid. But fear only works if we stay silent. So I ask you, are you willing to stay silent any longer? For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Robert, the elderly man who had once whispered his story in fear, stood up. His voice shook, but it carried. "No more silence, not from me." One by one, others stood too. Lisa, the young father, the family from the end of the street. Their voices rose together, a chorus of defiance. Karen's power had always been built on division. But in that clubhouse, in that moment, Anna united them. She gave them something Karen never could: hope. And as I looked around at the neighbors, their faces no longer bowed in shame, but lifted in courage, I realized something. Karen wasn't just losing control. She was losing the one thing she had always relied on: fear. But I also knew the danger. People like Karen don't fade away quietly. When their world collapses, they explode, and I could feel it in my bones. The explosion was coming. The night was quiet, but inside me there was no peace. My heart raced as I thought about every moment that had led to this final showdown. Karen had dragged us through humiliation, tried to use power she never had, and nearly ruined the name I had spent my life protecting. But tonight, it would all come to an end. Not through violence or shouting, but through truth, justice, and the weight of the very law she thought she could manipulate. As I sat in the study, papers and files spread out on the desk, my wife walked, in her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "Tomorrow's the day, isn't it?" she whispered. I nodded, my throat tight. Tomorrow, she learns the one lesson she can't twist: accountability. When the morning sun rose, it didn't feel warm. It felt sharp, like a blade cutting through the lies that had been spun for too long. Karen strutted into the courthouse lobby as if she were still queen of the neighborhood. Her pearls shimmered, her heels clicked, and that smug grin sat across her face like it had been painted there. She didn't know yet that her power was about to crumble. The officers who had once entertained her false complaints now stood with stone faces, no longer her allies, but protectors of truth. She caught my wife's eye and smirked. "Enjoy your last day in this neighborhood. Once I'm done with you, no one will want you here." My wife didn't answer. She just looked at her with the calm of someone who already knew the storm was about to hit. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The judge's seat remained empty for a moment, and Karen chuckled under her breath. "Oh, look, he's late. Guess justice doesn't wait for everyone." Then the bailiff's voice rang out, "Arise for the Honorable Judge Daniels." The doors opened, and I walked in, robes draped over my shoulders, authority heavy in every step. The color drained from Karen's face. Her smirk shattered. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her knees nearly buckled as she realized the man she had called the cops on. The one she accused, the one she mocked, was the very man who would now judge her fate. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Karen's husband shifted uncomfortably in his chair, realizing what this meant. Her friends from the HOA board stared in disbelief, shrinking back like rats caught in light. I sat, adjusted my robe, and spoke with a steady voice. "Court is now in session." Karen tried to stammer her way through, "Why, Your Honor, this is a conflict of interest. You can't preside." But before she could finish, another judge, a senior colleague of mine, walked in and sat beside me. "I'll be here to ensure fairness," he said. Karen's last hope of escape died in that instant. There would be no loopholes, no escape, only the truth. One by one, the lies unraveled. The fake fines, the doctored paperwork, the false police. Calls all laid bare with evidence I had collected. Officers testified about her manipulations. Neighbors spoke about her bullying. And even her closest allies confessed once the threat of perjury loomed over them. Karen sat there, her face pale, her hands trembling, her pearls no longer gleaming, but choking her with their weight. Every smug word she had ever thrown at us, every ounce of power she thought she held, dissolved under the crushing light of truth. My wife watched silently, tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of release, of healing after months of torment. Finally, the verdict was read. Karen was found guilty of harassment, fraud, and abuse of authority. Heavy fines were imposed, restitution ordered, and worst of all, for her. She was banned from holding any position of leadership in the HOA ever again. The very crown she had clung to so tightly was ripped from her head. She broke down, screaming, begging, clawing at the table as if somehow she could pull back the power slipping through her fingers. But no one helped her. Not her friends, not her husband, not the officers she once controlled. She was utterly alone. When the gavel struck, it felt like thunder rolling through the room. Justice was final. Karen was escorted out, her cries echoing through the hall like the hollow remnants of a fallen tyrant. My wife took my hand, squeezing it tightly. For the first time in a long time, she smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone who won a battle. It was the smile of someone who had finally been freed. That night, we sat by the lake, the same lake she once tried to control. The water shimmered under the moonlight, peaceful, calm. "Do you think she'll ever learn?" my wife asked softly. I looked out across the water, thinking of Karen's downfall. "Some people never learn," I admitted. "But whether she does or not, she can never touch us again." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was healing, the kind of silence that comes when the storm has passed and the air smells like rain and earth, fresh and alive. The neighborhood changed after that. The HOA, stripped of its corrupt leadership, was rebuilt with fairness and respect. Neighbors who once lived in fear now shared barbecues, laughter, and stories without worry. The darkness that hung over us had lifted, replaced by something brighter. My wife and I found not only peace but strength, a reminder that even in the face of cruelty, standing together could topple any giant. And as I held her hand, watching the ripples of the lake under the starlight, I realized the true revenge wasn't just in Karen's downfall. 'Twas in our healing, our joy, our ability to live free and whole again. The ultimate justice wasn't about crushing her. It was about reclaiming our lives and knowing she could never take them from us again.